How's it going everyone, my name's FallenDestroyer and welcome to the Warframe New Player's Guide, and today I'm going to be covering the different mission types, giving my thoughts and tips for them. So we'll start off with extermination, which is the standard game mode on Warframe, in which you have a certain number of enemies in which you need to kill. The number is generally between 80 to 160 depending on the difficulty of the mission, so the easier it is the less enemies you'll have to kill and the less varied the enemy units will be. And conversely, the higher the difficulty, the more enemies you will need to kill, and the more varied and harder to kill enemies will appear a lot more often. So I like to use extermination as a way to test out my weapon builds to find out if they're actually any good. For example, if I'm trying out a status chance build, I'll jump into a low level extermination and see how often I'm getting the procs to go off. Now you do have to weigh in the fact that a highly modified weapon is going to kill enemies from its higher base damage numbers, but it's still a good starting point to make sure you haven't made a mistake and you're putting the wrong type of mods on the weapon. Next we have defense missions, which are one of the most played game modes on Warframe, in which you're tasked with defending a cryopod against waves of enemies that increase in level. And the reason it's one of the most played game modes is because every 5 waves you get a reward, and you're also given the option to finish the mission there and then, but the more waves you do, the better the rewards can become. So most people play defense missions for the rewards you get every 5 waves, but it's also a really great place to farm materials, because you have a constant stream of enemies, and when the enemies start getting a little too strong for you, you can generally wait it out until the next reward and leave collecting all the previous rewards offered to you. Defense missions are also a really good way of testing out your Warframe builds, as often you'll have to bunker down and try and concentrate fire to deal with large groups of enemies, making it a really good place to try out your crowd control for a weapon or Warframe, or even to see how well you can tank damage, buff allies or debuff the enemy. Mobile defense missions are similar to standard defense missions, but you need to carry a device to a computer to hack it, and then guard the computer for a certain amount of time. So you have shorter times on lower difficulty missions and longer times on more computers that need hacking on higher difficulties. Now I'd like to point out that with every computer that you successfully defend, the enemies will start to level up. They can also become more varied and attack in greater numbers, which can lead to some very intense moments, especially on higher difficulties. So I really enjoy playing mobile defense missions because of the diverse conditions you're fighting in. So one minute you can be running around taking out large groups of enemies, and then the next minute you're sitting right next to the computer trying your best to defend it. And even a player going down can have a big impact, as you should revive them, but you also need to defend the objective, and it can lead to some really good clutch moments. Moving on to survival missions, I'd say these missions are the most played of any of the game modes in Warframe. And the basic premise is you've infiltrated an enemy ship and you distract the enemy while an unseen person searches the ship, and every 5 minutes you're given a reward. But the enemy has turned off the life support, so you need to activate life support capsules to keep you and your team alive, while fighting off enemies that increase in level, diversity and numbers as time progresses. You should also take into consideration sprinting, melee attacks and parkour all decrease the life support a hell of a lot faster than just running around normally. So survival missions are commonly used to farm for materials due to the number of enemies you'll be facing, so the odds are higher that the resources you're looking for will drop the longer you have spent in the game. Plus, with the reward earned every 5 minutes ranging from credits to mods and even blueprints in some cases, it makes playing them extremely worthwhile. And often the higher the difficulty of the mission, the better rewards, but this isn't always guaranteed. Next we have spy missions, in which you need to reach a certain part of the map and sneak in and hack a computer, and you'll get a reward for doing so. There's always 3 computers that need to be hacked, but you only need to successfully hack 1 to complete the mission. But around the computer room will be enemies patrolling, as well as lasers that will sound an alarm if you hit them. If this happens, it puts the computer into a countdown phase, so you need to quickly figure out how to get into the room and hack the computer before the data is lost. Spy missions are possibly the most lucrative in the game and can even drop event mods that don't drop from enemies anymore. So the chances of you getting an extremely rare or good reward is dramatically increased when playing spy missions. Plus, if you hack all 3 computers, then it's 3 chances to get better rewards. Now, where possible, I recommend you play these missions with Loki, as he can turn invisible and run straight past the enemies, but you can't run straight through the lasers, so you still will need to be careful around those. Alternatively, you can use a Hurras Kubro, with the Stalk mod maxed out, as your Kubro can turn you invisible for a small amount of time as well. Capture missions are possibly one of the quickest mission types in Warframe, as most of the time you can just ignore all the enemies and run straight for your target. Once you find them, you need to kill them before they can reach their escape point. When you've done enough damage to them, they will drop to the floor and you will need to capture them. This only takes a few seconds, but you can't move or attack while doing so. So try to clear as many enemies as quickly as you can so you don't get killed while you're trying to capture them. Next we have rescue missions, which can be one of the most difficult missions to complete. You need to reach a holding area where your target is located and break them out. But patrolling the area are enemies called wardens, which are harder to kill but shouldn't provide too much trouble if you stealth kill them. Once you locate the target cell that the prisoner you need to rescue is in, you need to hack your way in and they will follow you. You're also able to give them your secondary weapon so that they can defend themselves, as they can be killed, which will lead to you failing the mission. Either way, once they're free from the cell, make your way towards the exit and the prisoner will follow behind you. So sabotage missions are again very easy to do, much like deception and capture missions. Each mission will involve you reaching a certain point on the map and you will either have a vehicle of some description to destroy, or you will need to hack a console to reveal your target. Either way, once it's destroyed, you will be able to leave. So similar to capture and deception missions, you will often find players that rush towards the objective, not worrying about the enemies along the way, doing the objective and then leaving straight away. Next we have extraction missions, which are similar to mobile defense, in which you need to reach a certain area and defend it for a set amount of time. Only in this game mode an extractor will land and you will need to keep it powered while it digs. So there's going to be enemies walking around with power cores on them, so you need those to power the extractor, and it will also instantly restore its shields if it's taking any damage. So 1 unit of power translates to 1 second and you get 20 power per core. So if the timer is for 120 seconds, you will need to add 5 power cores to it to keep it powered for the entire duration, as the extractor starts with 20 power when it lands. Okay, so these missions are a really good place to farm for materials, void keys and mods, as each extractor gives you a reward when it's finished digging. But with each extractor that is successful, the enemies grow stronger as well. So when things start to get too much for you, then you can just head to the exit, as you only need to successfully complete 1 extraction before you're able to leave. Interception is a capture and hold style mission, in which there are 4 objectives in close proximity to each other, in which you need to hold at least 3 of them, or until your data is higher than that of the enemies, then you only need to hold 2 of the objectives. In these missions, enemies will attack in groups and will often bypass you and head straight for the objective so they can capture it. They can also capture it a lot faster than players because they can use a computer to make it theirs after only a few seconds. So you will need to keep an eye out on the A, B, C and D markers in the top left, which will flash when the enemies attempt to capture it from you. Now I highly advise you don't play this mission type solo, as some of the maps are often quite large and trying to cover as many objectives as possible can be a real struggle. Either way, when you reach 100% you will get the option to stay and repeat the capture process again, much like in defense missions where you're given a reward every 5 waves. So if you do decide to stay, remember that enemies will grow in strength and numbers, but the rewards will also improve as well each time you're successful. Next we have deception, and again, like spy missions, these are really quick missions to do. You need to carry a device to a computer and put it in before you can leave. So you will often find players that don't even kill a single enemy on these missions and instead use speed to bypass all the enemies and put the device in the computer and then just leave. And to be honest, there's not really much else I can say about these missions because it really is just that simple. And finally we have the tower and the Orokin variants of most of the missions I've already talked about. The main difference is the enemy types you'll be facing. The missions also scale in difficulty very quickly, making them much harder to complete if you're underprepared. For the tower variants you will need to get a key to access them, but these are common rewards from defense, survival, interception and spy missions. So there's plenty of options open to you for actually getting these keys. And the keys range from tower 1 to tower 4, with tower 4 being the hardest. The main reason these missions are so good is because they're one of 2 places you can get the prime rewards from, whether it's a blueprint for a weapon, Warframe, Sentinel or an Archwing. So these types of missions are constantly available to you if you use the recruiting chat, as people are often looking for help to complete the mission. So if you do join someone else that's using one of their keys, don't forget to say a quick thank you in the squad chat after the mission's completed, as it really does go a long way. And for the Orokin missions, you can actually make the keys in your foundry, and you can buy the blueprints off the market. You only need to buy one of the blueprints for each key, as the blueprint never expires after use. And much like the tower missions, you will get prime part rewards fairly consistently, but just like in the tower missions, the enemies will scale in level, variety and numbers very quickly, and lots of them have debuff effects that can easily take down a team if they get overwhelmed, which is very common. But I do find these missions are somewhat easier to do than tower missions for newer players, simply because as the enemies begin to scale, you're never too far away from reaching your next reward so that you can leave. So there you have it, that's all the basic missions explained, with some uses as to what they're actually useful for. There are a few other mission types for Archwings which I haven't covered here, but I will be covering in a later video. So if you have any questions, then feel free to leave a comment or a message on Twitter and I'll answer it as soon as I can. So that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you found it helpful, then don't forget to smash that like button before you go, and if you're new to the channel, then why not subscribe as well. So until the next video, toodle pip.